Why did the Russia-Ukraine war start? Let's break it down simply. It began with Ukraine's shift toward the West. Ukraine started moving closer to the EU and Western allies like the US. This made Russia uncomfortable. They see Ukraine as a strategic neighbor and a key part of their historical influence. To the Russian leadership, Ukraine moving toward Western alliances felt like a direct threat. The biggest issue at the heart of this conflict is NATO, a powerful military alliance. Ukraine showed strong interest in joining, but NATO had already been expanding closer and closer to Russia's borders over the years. Russia feared having NATO weapons right at its doorstep and losing its strategic security control in the region. So, for the Russian leadership, this wasn't just about politics. It was a deep-seated fear for their national security. It's important to remember that this war didn't start in 2022. It actually began much earlier. In 2014, Russia took control of Crimea, and fighting began in eastern Ukraine's Donbas region. Since then, the two nations have been in a state of ongoing conflict. 2022 was an escalation, not the beginning. Understanding this history is key to seeing the full picture of what's happening today. On February 24, 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, marking a major turning point in modern history. Russia claimed it wanted to stop NATO expansion, protect Russian-speaking regions, and demilitarize the country. But Ukraine and its allies saw this very differently, as a direct and unprovoked attack on a sovereign and independent nation. This clash of perspectives remains at the core of the ongoing struggle for Ukraine's future. Before sunrise, explosions shook cities across Ukraine. The Russian invasion of Ukraine had begun. Missiles hit major cities across the entire country. Troops crossed borders from multiple directions. Air raid sirens woke millions. People ran from their homes, confused, terrified. By morning, the entire country was at war. Russia moved fast, targeting the capital, Kyiv. Russian tanks advanced rapidly toward the heart of the city. Inside the city, millions of terrified civilians sought refuge in subway stations, turning transit hubs into bomb shelters. Major roads were filled with millions of people desperately fleeing. But Ukraine resisted much harder than the world ever expected. They thought Kyiv would fall in days. It didn't. The world responded immediately to the escalating crisis. Massive sanctions hit Russia, shaking the foundations of its economy. Countries across the globe began sending advanced weapons and equipment to support Ukraine. Millions of refugees were forced to flee their homes, crossing borders into Europe in search of safety and shelter. The war wasn't just regional anymore. It became global. But as the world watched, something darker was discovered. After Russian forces finally withdrew from the areas near Kyiv, the world looked on in horror. The town of Bucha revealed devastating scenes that would forever change the narrative of this war. Images spread globally, and accusations of war crimes intensified as the international community called for justice. The emotional weight of the war deepened as a grieving world sought justice for the victims. This was no longer just a war between nations. It had become a profound humanitarian crisis. The war did not end as quickly as the world hoped. Instead, it turned into a long, grinding fight. Front lines barely moved, with soldiers entrenched in a frozen, scarred landscape. Cities faced repeated missile strikes, and devastating power outages hit millions during the height of winter. Both sides suffered heavy losses as the conflict settled into a brutal war of attrition. The pace of the war slowed down significantly. But the fighting didn't stop for a single day. The year 2024 brought with it a new and more dangerous phase of escalation. The very nature of the battlefield was changing. Advanced drones and long-range missiles became the defining tools of this new high-tech era of conflict. Western countries reaffirmed their unwavering commitment, supplying even more advanced defense systems to Ukraine. But as the weapons grew more lethal, so did the friction and tensions between the world's major global powers. The chilling fear of a wider, even more devastating conflict began to loom heavily over the international community. Today, the world watches and waits, asking one fundamental question: just how far will this go? At its core, this war is about more than just borders. It's about power, control, and the future of Europe. It's a struggle for power and influence, fueled by deep-seated security fears, especially from the Russian side. But it's also fundamentally about Ukraine's right to choose its own future and its own alliances as a sovereign nation. Ultimately, this is a major global rivalry between Russia and the West, with the future of the international order at stake.